Thank you everyone so much for coming. Today we're going to be talking about how to make data analysis effortless with the dbt semantic layer. I'm Jordan Stein, a product manager at dbt Labs focused on the semantic layer. And this is what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to chat about the lessons learned since we GA'd the semantic layer last year at Coalesce and some of the product improvements we've made since then. Next, I'll walk you through what we have planned for the semantic layer and how we want to simplify analytics workflows. And finally, Hanss, who's up here in the front row from Brightside Health, is going to share his story of how his company used the semantic layer to serve trusted metrics to their customers in production. And finally, we'll save some time for some Q&A. First, we're going to do a quick review. What does the semantic layer do? What we typically see at companies that don't have a semantic layer is metrics defined separately in many different tools. So when someone asks a simple question, like what is revenue in June, it's difficult to get a straight answer. Since the definition for this metric is scattered throughout various consumption layers and isn't defined in the same way. This leads to a loss of trust in the data team and lots of toil trying to unwind where this discrepancy came from. With the semantic layer, metrics are defined centrally, in code, in dbt, and federated out to different consumption layers through our APIs. So when someone asks for revenue in June through the semantic layer, we get the same answer every time. And you can see the structure of what that semantic layer query looks like on the slide here. This is what your data infrastructure looks like when you have a semantic layer. You're landing raw data in your warehouse, transforming it with dbt, and defining metric definitions in your dbt project. You're then serving those metric definitions through our semantic layer APIs to wherever your users need to consume metrics. Thank you for bearing with me through that review. And if you're new to the semantic layer, hopefully it's a bit more clear why you need it and where it sits in the data stack. Now let's chat about where we are in this journey since we GA'd the semantic layer last year at Coalesce. Since then, over 500 companies have queried the semantic layer. 1 million semantic layer queries have run in production, and we've had over 20 releases. We're thrilled with this momentum and have learned a lot since we launched. I want to share those learnings with you as they are directly related to our roadmap and what we plan to build with the semantic layer in the coming year. In working closely with our customers, we've identified a few different personas that touch the semantic layer. We're going to call those personas Developer Diego, Analyst Andrea, and Demand Gen Danny. Developer Diego is on the data engineering team. He's responsible for creating data pipelines, preparing data sets for analysis, setting up the semantic layer, and configuring his company's metrics. His work directly supports the work of Analyst Andrea. Analyst Andrea sits under the analytics team. Her job is to derive insights from data. She's a SQL pro and is learning Python and mostly works in SQL workbooks, notebooks, docs, and BI tools. She consumes the metric definitions and puts them to work building reports and conducting analyses, and her work directly supports Demand Gen Danny. Lastly, we have Demand Gen Danny. She sits under marketing and owns the performance of metrics defined in the semantic layer. She's data savvy, but her goal is to drive leads for the sales team, and data is a tool for her to do that more effectively. What's really interesting about this org structure, and we've observed many different variations of this at our different customers, but is the horizontal lines of support between these different personas. They all have different goals, but at the end of the day, they all want to make better business decisions with data. And what we found is that the semantic layer is a real key enabler to driving alignment between data engineering, analytics, and ultimately your business stakeholders, and getting value from the massive investment that you've made in your data. So let's talk about what are the semantic layer product investments we've made and are continuing to make, and how it relates to these personas we've identified. We're investing in 3 areas of the semantic layer, and each impacts the personas we just discussed. We want to make it dead simple to build and deploy your semantic layer. We want to expand and improve the ways you can consume your metrics. And we want to be able to scale to serve the biggest organizations and data sets. These are the three broad themes that we're focused on. We're excited to announce new functionality today that makes it easier to build and deploy the semantic layer. We've added AI code generation for semantic models, so you can get spun up using the semantic layer extremely quickly. Thank you, Roxy. We built a semantic layer integration with the Cloud IDE to improve the developer experience and build out a cohesive workflow. And we've released custom calendar support in metric flow, so you can aggregate metrics by custom granularities like fiscal month or retail month, which is very useful as we all are using different reporting periods. And let's face it, time is a very hard concept in data. So I'm going to show you guys a quick demo of code generation in the IDE and querying the semantic layer through the IDE so you can get a sense of what some of these look like within dbt Cloud. Give me a moment as I scroll over on this tiny screen. And I'll play a demo video here.
I wanted to give you a demo of the new development experience for the semantic layer within dbt Cloud. So let's pretend I am an analyst at the Jaffle shop, and we just launched a new product called Jaffle Pass, which is our subscription product for the Jaffle shop. It gives you exclusive benefits, discounts on orders, and a lot of great stuff. So we want to go ahead and analyze how the launch has gone. So I'm in the IDE here, and I have this new model called subscription invoices, which measures the invoices for the Jaffle Pass. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a semantic model, which you can now do with dbt Assist. So we will generate a semantic model. OK, that was pretty fast. It did the generation here. I'm looking through this. This all looks good. Maybe this total amount field or measure I'll just rename to total subscription amount, just so it's a bit more clear. Other than that, looks like it did a great job generating. So I'll go ahead and save that. And looks like it parsed correctly. And right away, we have lineage here to see what semantic models and metrics were created. So we are feeding from subscription invoices, and we have 3 metrics that were generated as part of the code generation here. OK, so this looks really good. I want to go ahead and query some of these metrics. So within here, I can go dbt sl list dimensions for metrics, total subscription amount. So just to understand what dimensions are available to query here. OK, so for this metric, I can query by metric time, invoice status, invoice date, created at. Let's just do metric time. So I'm going to go ahead and run dbt sl query metrics total subscription amount. And we'll group by metric time month. So I can go ahead and run that. And right away, I can see the actual values for this query. So I see the metric time month and the total subscription amount that we are invoicing for each month.
OK. So yeah, just want to show you guys that demo of what it looks like to quickly build and iterate metrics and semantic models in the IDE with some of the new tools that we're launching. And both of these are available, code generation in beta and the semantic layer IDE integration GA within dbt Cloud today. We're also announcing 3 upcoming additions to our BI ecosystem to make it easier to consume the metrics that you've created. The first is support for Tableau Cloud. Companies are already using our connector to query the semantic layer in Tableau Server and Tableau Desktop. The launch of Tableau Cloud is a big step forward for the maturity of this integration and deepens our partnerships with Tableau. This is slated for a beta release in H2 of this year. Next, we're announcing an integration with Power BI. We're currently scoping out this integration and can't share timelines yet, but we see this as a major opportunity for the semantic layer and are heavily investing in this integration. Finally, Sigma is building an integration with the semantic layer. Sigma is a hugely popular BI tool that combines the best of spreadsheets and BI, and their integration is currently in a private beta. These additions expand our integration ecosystem and the way you can query metrics with the semantic layer. For those who want to query the semantic layer directly, we're also excited to announce the GA of our Python SDK. This simplifies connecting to our APIs by managing querying, rate limiting, and polling, and makes it easier to build out custom data apps with the semantic layer API. This is just a quick example of how 40 lines of code to set up querying through our APIs can be simplified to just one function with our SDK and make this development process a lot easier. So a lot of new ways you can actually consume from the semantic layer. The goal of these product investments is to help you get from semantic layer curious, just testing things out, to up and running and serving metrics to everyone across your organization. These are some of the other features we've released this year across these three dimensions. I'm happy to chat about anything here that catches your eye in the question period or after the session. Let's talk about the semantic layer roadmap and where we're going next year. One idea that we've been exploring is that metrics are the interface between business stakeholders and data. They're the common language of business that your company speaks. The business stakeholders own the metric performance and definition, and the data analyst owns the technical implementation of that definition. We want to support end-to-end workflows in dbt for analyst Andrea so she can make this connection even stronger and ultimately derive more value from your investment in data. We're exploring a few different areas of the product that can help make this workflow easier for the analyst. For example, Explorer for analysts and tailoring the Explorer experience we already have to serve their needs. Building a query interface in dbt backed by semantics. GAing AskDBT, an LLM-powered chat with your data experience that's currently in beta within the Snowflake marketplace. And using the visual editor to author metric definitions by adding more code gen capabilities, as well as in the IDE. If you're interested in how dbt Cloud and the semantic layer can help support analysts, again, please come find me after the talk, and I'd love to chat. Now I'm going to hand things off to Hanss to chat about how Brightside uses the dbt semantic layer. Let's give it up for Hanss, everybody.
All right. Hello, hello. Hanss Nelsen, Chief Data Officer at Brightside Health. Quick about me, I did a lot of work in the data field, but just in the healthcare space. That's where I've been for the last dozen years or so. Worked on the Open FDA project for the Obama initiative. That was fun, very gratifying, making data available to data scientists in the adverse event space. Then moved on to GoodRx, where I sort of got really into developing data orgs and built that org from the ground up. And that was the first time I'd done that. And so I was super excited to I got a taste for two things: building data orgs and mission-based companies are kind of intoxicating. So if no one's ever worked for a mission-based company, they're amazing. I strongly suggest it. Makes work way easier, less politics. So super fun. So now I work at Brightside Health, where we deliver. And so what do? We kind of do the hard things in the mental health space. Is the way we kind of try to tackle the harder things, because there's a gridlock between like payers and like providers. People think there's not enough providers in the world, and there's just not enough in-network providers. And so like, how do you solve that gridlock problem? Short answer, because I only have 10 minutes, is we do it with data. We try to build a trust signal between us and the providers, because in digital health, you have like a complete telemetry, which is great. Like you get everything feeds into the system. And so you're able to provide a really depth of observability back to the payers to build their trust, and then you still have to deliver with high quality care, which we do, which is amazing. And so we were able to take on really hard things like suicide prevention program. We don't kick people into the ER, and now we're starting an IOP business for intensive outpatient. But yeah, so check us out if you need mental health services or someone you think does. We take 135 million people's insurance, and that number will increase to about 200 million by the end of the year. So trying to really make it easy to get access for high quality care. And And so what kind of data do we have is kind of an interesting question. We have all the telemetry from our care and our platform. We also have a two-sided marketplace. Trying to pair doctors with providers, patients is a thing, right? You basically wind up running 51 separate companies because of all the state legislation, and multiply that by the type of programs you have, and we have 3 distinct programs, so we basically run 151 separate companies, and then add in a bunch of payers into the mix, and we have 2,200 permutations of care that we have to manage, and so how do we do that? We do that by making it so our both clinicians and our operations folks, our ClinOps, don't have to do a lot of context switching while they're taking care. They already have context switching built into their lives with going patient to patient to patient. So making them bump out to Tableau seems like a small thing, but when you do that 50 times a day to get a number, it can kind of creates a toil that is we can do better. So our initial investment sort of into what were some of the data challenges we were trying to prevent, where I hate reading slides. So basically we were a classic Series B startup when I showed up. Like, we had built a bunch of stuff and it was starting to fall apart. Had a bunch of stuff in spreadsheets, a bunch of stuff going up to Slack, some Tableau reporting, some rich, we built the first, data problems are like a supply chain problem in the first phase, and then a manufacturing, and then a publishing. This is kind of how I kind of look at it. And we kind of tackled the supply chain part of it, but not the manufacturing bit of it. And so we've leaned into the manufacturing bit over the last year and created some nice things, but now we're in the publishing phase where we're trying to make these data accessible to everybody and kind of make everybody's job with less toil, all the data consumers and producers. And so what's the right way to do that is kind of the question when you have a problem space that is sort of getting out of control. Your intuition is to apply control. So where is the right place to assert that control? You can kind of, traditionally in the past, people do it with organization. You try to centralize everything, circle the wagons, make sure only certain people touch the data. Very slow. You try to maybe centralize around a tool and say, everybody, if you want your gold data, go to Tableau, and which then limits your data scientists, limits your developers, limits other Excel power users. It's a limiting thing to try to get that kind of control. So to me, what was attractive about the semantic layer was this ability to sort of put control in the right place and still not give up the flexibility. So, and then you add on to that the developments around GraphQL, which means you don't have to maintain like this endless versioning system. It's kind of baked into GraphQL. You now have this really powerful system where you can kind of put your investment in one thing and then get to reuse it a bunch without feeling like people are getting the wrong answers. So let's see. So our primary thing we're interested in is Tableau Cloud. We were waiting on that, but there's also a bunch of other stuff we want. So embedded analytics is one of the things that we're highly interested in. And that's that single, we have a phrase that we call single pane of glass. We just try to keep the operations folks and the clinicians not turning their head a bunch, like not having them bounce out to a bunch of places because their context switching budget is, we want that focused on the patient. So this is just a screenshot example of a very complicated metric that we have to deliver, like hours available on a panel. It's not an obvious thing. Like, it has to do with a bunch of forecasting that then gets blended together to predict how many hours we think we can add into a panel. And then the operations folks have to follow up with providers because we have a lot of contractors and we're not in charge of their hours, so it's a negotiation at that point. So getting that all in one place is very powerful for us, and the semantic layer has made that a breeze to just expose. I would suggest we have an API layer on top using Apogee. We don't expose it directly, that because we want to be able to do drill throughs as well. So we don't want to burden the semantic layer with a bunch of detailed data flying around. So we can talk about that later if you want. The other benefit that we see is on the data science front. The data scientists were spending way too much time reconstructing metrics that they were trying to optimize. And so now they can just basically write a GraphQL query and load up their notebook during the exploratory phase. And it's just a game changer. You don't want to have everybody have to recreate the truth to try to make an optimization. And data scientists are high leverage individual in the organization. We don't want them doing data janitor work. We don't want them doing data discovery work. We want them doing model selection, model training, putting things into production so they can see if there's an advantage to having their model. So yeah, it's a proper use of their skill and their interest and their time to have an API on top of your metrics. And then, like, the thing that's most fascinating to me, and shout out to our friends at Push AI, we've been working with them quite a bit, is this concept of having a crawlable API around your metrics is fascinating. Like, you can, once you have all your metrics in one place and you can, like, stick something on them to kind of see, and then, like, Push AI allows us to sort of build a graph of the metrics and how they relate to each other. And then you can start to see all sorts of nice storytelling and narrative that comes out of it. We're highly interested in the anomaly detection. Like, we have a bunch of, our organization is a bunch of single mission-based pods with, like, think of those as towers, and then we have horizontal layers underneath our, like, platform. And the verticals want to focus on their key metrics, their tier 1 metrics and maybe their tier 2 metrics. But at some point, they need to understand the whole story. They need to understand, like, the classic example is conversion rate on our platform is very dependent upon the quality of the network. But the network team is managing the networks, but they're now exposing their quality scores via the semantic layer. And so now the conversion team or the growth team can actually peer in and see, are they sending traffic to sort of really hard to convert networks that have very little capacity. And it seems, but the fact that it's all in an API now just makes it great. And then the fact that it's a crawlable API means that Push AI can be, the computer or the robot can now be looking for interesting stories to bubble up to the users. And so we're having a lot of fun with that. So, and so, let me see. Yeah, this is just sort of a, sorry, I can't see this slide on my screen, so I'm sorry. Yeah, this is just a summary, but it's about delivering the solution at the right point of control is probably the TLDR. It's like an API is amazing. I would not be surprised if, like, once this stuff takes off, you'll start seeing, like I'm looking forward to being integrated into Asana and just have, like, real-time, you know, OKR data just flowing in, like, not a problem. So, but yeah, I think the future's here. I've been hearing about this stuff since '98, and it's never really come to pass. But I think GraphQL is like one of the hidden gems in the whole thing. Like, having an API that you don't have to manage a bunch of versions around is a real relief, and it allows this stuff to be, you know, using the trust that the rest of the DBT platform gives us. So, yep, that's all I have. So. Oh, yeah. You can ask me questions, but keep in mind that I'm an executive, so I don't really know anything. So.
All right, thanks everybody. Yeah, now time for some Q&A. I think, do we have mics for people, or should they just shout out? Oh, we got some mics. Okay, yeah, question. I saw one over here. You can project.
Testing.
I think it's
1,
fine.
2, 3, test.
How did you get started? Like, it's a very, a lot of change in the business to, like, get oriented around metrics. Like, where did you pick your first data for metrics, and how did you get that adopted?
Yeah, I presume that question was for me and not him. Yeah, I'm very lucky to work at a I wouldn't say it's completely a non-political company, but, like, very little politics, so there's not a lot of territorial battles, which is a relief. But even then, like, where is the right point for us? We would have preferred to start on the Tableau cloud integration, to be honest with you, just because that's where we get the biggest bang for the buck. But, like, we're patient, but and we'll be able to reuse whatever we've invested now. So the second use case was around embedded analytics. And so, and our network team was the one who was the most in spreadsheets and Slack is kind of what because our goal is to eliminate toil in the operation life. And so we just picked the activity where people were bouncing around the most, just to do a single task and try to get all of that data in one place. And so that's how we chose it. How we got support for it, I don't know, I love our company, so, like, we just, we have just enough nerd in us that, like, when you start talking about stuff like this, it's easy to get excitement. And the fact that you can deliver this stuff so quickly, because we already had a strong investment in DBT, it wasn't like we had to build it from the ground it just slaps right on top of your existing model so nicely. So yeah.
The other thing I'll add there, just from like seeing implementation, across our customer base, is people really do start like, and we encourage this, is like one use case, start small. You like have a set of high visibility marketing or like finance metrics, and there's one report that people use and see. Let's onboard that piece of the DAG and like get the use case working end to end and like show value quickly, and then you can go and move on to your more long tail like metrics and reports that you want. But that's how we encourage people to like scope POCs and scope how they actually want to roll out the semantic layer. Any other questions? Yeah, one right there.
Would you recommend that people start with GPT-4, like just for that first use case, or do you think that there's like a lot of switch cost to go from?
So there are like different pieces of the semantic layer. One is the metric spec, so how you actually define the metrics and semantic models within your project, and that's that like build pillar that I was talking about. The spec is open source, and so you can go and define your metrics in dbt core. You can query them in the command line, and we use the connection to your database to look at that definition and sort of single player mode say, hey, is this going to work for me? Like, let me test it out. To scale it out to any sort of size, like even a small team, you do need cloud because that's where our APIs live, and that's how you can then go the consume part of it and like use these metric definitions in the places that you want them. So I would say if you want to start out and like test this and iterate within the data team, you can use core for that. And there's no switching cost to going from then, hey, let me put those metrics in cloud, because it's all the same spec. We're just running your project in cloud. So you could easily start that way. But if there is like, I want to productionize this, that next step is cloud only. Yeah, question in the back there.
Test.
What is the value of the semantic layer over a more traditional like medallion architecture with tables? Because this does add a new complexity that teams and systems need to learn and use versus just tables labeled as gold layer.
Yeah, totally. I think about this a lot in the world of like cubes, right? Like before we were all making cubes, and like there's like SAS cubes and like really old like ways to do that, which are essentially building what you're talking about, which is these like reporting layers or like aggregation tables that say like roll up certain facts and to a certain level of dimensionality, materialize that, and then like, okay, everyone, let's shake hands and agree that this is the source of truth. So that like gets you pretty far. That's pretty much what everyone's doing today. If you remember that first slide of like where are metrics defined, that works. I think the challenge with that is like they are very static representations of your data. Like these cubes are built as part of your DAG. Whereas when you're querying with the semantic layer, it's all dynamic, right? Like you can form a GraphQL request that requests 3 metrics by 4 dimensions. You can add another one, which may actually join in another table and do that like denormalization for you on the fly. And you just get so much more flexibility. And what we also see if people take that approach of like, let me build out my gold layer, there is a lot of duplication that ends up happening where you get, like revenue by month, by sales region, and then you need it by a different granularity. And so your DAG kind of just like explodes. And like, it's expensive, you have to manage it. So I'd say that's one of like the main benefits of going for a semantics first approach versus like, let me just build egg tables or cubes. And then the other one, which I think Hanss talked a lot about, is like the fact that you can expose these through APIs, I think is really useful. And then the third one I would say is like that collaboration piece between business stakeholders and the data team. Like it's hard to collaborate around tables, right? Like it's hard to like get into a room with your business stakeholder and say like, I built this table for you, like all your problems have been solved. Whereas when you're bring that conversation to the metric level, and you have all of like the metadata and the stuff we're exposing in Explorer, you can have that conversation in a more productive way. So that's like the other benefit that I've kind of seen there as well.
Yeah, everything in data sort of turtles all the way down. Like everything's kind of looks the same at some point. I think like everything's ETL on some level. I think, and so like just the same reason you love SQL is that you don't have to. It's a declarative language, is you don't have to understand the implementation of it. Like you don't have to know how all the indexes and double linked lists work under the hood in order to be good at SQL. You can learn it in like 4 days and master it in 25 years, but you can learn it in 4 days. And so the same thing happens at GraphQL. Like you're just widening the audience now. And like now you can have some developers and some other integration tool people like Push AI, you know, that come along and can like just take this declarative thing and not have to understand how to write SQL in order to use it. And that's the real unlock is like, there's a certain like masochist that loves to write SQL, you know, and not everybody has that like trait. And so this just widens the audience around some, because like running a business is all about making decisions and who can make decisions faster, who can learn faster and get the compound interest that like knowledge gives you on your next decision is vital. And so like widening that out to a wider audience is what the semantic layer, for me anyway, that's what it gives us. So.
We have time for one more. I saw your hand go up very quickly. I'll be around after too, so feel free to come up and ask questions.
Yeah, I specifically wanted to ask about the experience with building the semantic layer on top of like really large data sizes, where that when you mentioned the cube, sometimes it's sort of like for a processing reason, you actually want to pre-aggregate, or you don't want to like keep allowing people to hit the API over and over again. What does that look like, either from like a best practices standpoint or like functionality of the semantic layer?
Yeah, for sure. So I said in my last answer, we're great because we don't build cubes. We also can build cubes if you want. So that's like our caching functionality, where if you say, hey, I have this massive data set, it's like telemetry data, it's huge, like I can't, expose this to anyone and let them query it. You can say like, hey, I have a certain query that I want to materialize in my cache, and then we'll actually use that pre-agged query when we get the API request and say, hey, go to this cache table, and then we'll manage the invalidation for you, figuring out when new data has arrived. So that's how we sort of manage that. And then announced as like one of the pre-announced slides, it was kind of small, but we're building out like aggregate aware caching. So instead of having to say like, I want to specify the exact dimensionality. If you go and query the cache and we realize we can like roll up one of those tables to the dimensionality requested, we'll then just serve the metric from the cache and try and manage performance that way. Cool. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Really appreciate it. And then I'll be around if you have more questions.